Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Wednesday, October 8th, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, breaking down Trump's threats over furloughed workers and back pay, plus the Supreme Court deals with the ban on conversion therapy, and the baseball playoffs roll on. The federal government's partial shutdown has entered its 8th day, and there are still no signs of a visible budget deal between Democrats and Republicans. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump is threatening to block furloughed federal workers from receiving back pay once the shutdown is over. I spoke with USA Today White House correspondent Joey Garrison for more. Joey, thanks for hopping on.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Just starting with these latest comments, Joey, what did Trump say here about furloughed workers and back pay?
Yeah, so President Trump basically threatened to block federal workers who are on furlough right now during the shutdown, block them from receiving back pay once they return to work when the shutdown ends. He was asked pointedly during the Oval Office whether he thinks furloughed workers are owed back pay under federal law. And he then went on to say some people don't deserve the pay. And so really opened up the door that this could be a possibility. It was definitely a threat that the administration could choose to withhold payments to workers once they start again. And this comes as there's been floated a new legal interpretation of federal law that the Office of Management and Budget within the White House has put out there, which they don't think that furloughed workers are automatically guaranteed back pay. And so, this is another threat from Trump, really aimed at Senate Democrats, saying, hey, this is something that could happen, unless you join with Republicans to reopen the government. He's already threatened mass layoffs of workers, among other things, cutting programs that Democrats have supported. He's already put these threats out there. This adds to that right now.
Well, Joe, you bring up this Government Employee Fair Treatment Act in this piece. Can you just fill our listeners in on what that is and what legal framework it maybe gives us amid this?
I mean, first of all, federal workers, and you only have to go back to the 2019 shutdown. This was the last one, which happened when Trump was president. Customarily, historically, they are not paid during the shutdown, but they are given that back pay when they return. This happened in 2019, and there was a federal law, in fact, to reinforce this that was passed during that shutdown that pretty explicitly states they shall be paid for the period of the lapse. Now, the White House has pointed to a loophole here regarding an amendment that was attached to that bill after its passage that says furloughed workers will be paid back, quote, subject to the enactment of appropriations in the lapse. Okay, so that's kind of getting wonky there, but they're saying, hey, whether you're owed pay or not is subject to what is passed out of that shutdown. So they're essentially saying there's some ambiguity here. And the White House is trying to cite this loophole to say, there are legal questions over whether back pay is guaranteed. Now, if the Trump administration goes forward with this threat and actually does withhold it, there's going to be a mountain of lawsuits led by the unions that represent federal workers. You can guarantee that. Democrats are right now accusing Trump and Republicans of effectively violating the law by even pretending that workers wouldn't get their pay that they're due. And so right now, I think the way to see it is kind of another threat in the bag of threats that Trump has made to try to get Democrats to approve a clean bill that Republicans have been pushing forward for weeks now.
So, Joey, what's next here amid potentially looming layoffs and this ongoing shutdown? Where do we go next?
Well, I mean, I think where we go next is really looking at some other recent comments Trump has made about open to possible negotiations over healthcare subsidies and extending them as part of a government shutdown deal. Democrats, one of the things that they've demanded for their support to reopen the government is that these Obamacare subsidies, which again expire at the end of the year, that they're extended. And Trump the other day, for the first time, suggested he's open to negotiating with Democrats on that. And so we'll see if anything comes out of that, but it does seem to be a potential off-ramp for this whole impasse if both sides were to get on that. I mean, I think Democrats are skeptical whether Trump is serious about that, but There's another thing Democrats have also pushed, which is reversing the Medicaid cuts from Trump's one big beautiful bill. This wouldn't go that far to alleviate that for Democrats. But I do wonder whether if they can get some sort of buy-in from the White House from Trump on extending those healthcare subsidies, whether that might be enough Democrats to vote with Republicans to perhaps end this. I think, that's something to look for.
All right. Joey Garrison covers the White House for USA Today. I appreciate you, Joey.
Hey, thank you so much.
As the shutdown continues, one issue is center stage in the debate.
The obvious piece of a compromise would be the extension of Obamacare subsidies. That appears to be something that both Democrats, of course, have been advocating for it, but there are many states where Republicans have a lot of people who participate in Obamacare. And right now, if those subsidies expire, and the prospect is that those premiums are going to go up more than double.
White House correspondent Bart Jansen joins my colleague Dana Taylor to take a deeper dive into battles between Republicans and Democrats while Americans wait for the government to reopen. You can listen to that conversation later today, beginning at 4 p.m. Eastern. Attorney General Pam Bondi was grilled by Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday, and she refused to answer questions while launching personal attacks against some of them when they accused her of stonewalling. She was received differently by Republicans who praised her throughout the hearing, saying she's made good on her and President Donald Trump's pledges to rid the Justice Department of partisan politics, cut crime, and help deport immigrants in the country illegally. Democrats, though, said the former personal Trump lawyer and Florida Attorney General gutted key elements of the Justice Department, including its public corruption unit. Some of the more tense exchanges also came in response to questions about Jeffrey Epstein and Bondi's joint announcement with FBI Director Kash Patel in July that they would not be releasing the so-called Epstein files or evidence of crimes involving Epstein in their possession after repeatedly promising to do so. You can read more from yesterday's hearing with a link in today's show notes. Supreme Court justices heard oral arguments yesterday over a ban on conversion therapy. I caught up with USA Today Supreme Court correspondent Maureen Groppe for more. Hello, Maureen.
Hello.
So just starting with the basics, what's at issue in this case?
This case is about whether a Colorado law that bans what's commonly referred to as conversion therapy, whether that ban infringes on a counselor's free speech rights. A lower court said that the law does not because it's about medical practice, not about speech that's covered by the First Amendment. But the Supreme Court seemed to agree with the counsel who's challenging the ban that her speech is being affected by this law. And if that's how they eventually rule, the next step is deciding whether Colorado has a good enough reason to do that.
All right. Well, I know we heard oral arguments yesterday, Tuesday. Let's start with some of the lawyer back and forth over whether this type of so-called therapy is effective. Maureen, what did we hear from those arguments?
Well, Colorado's attorney said people have been trying to do conversion therapy for 100 years and there's no record of success. All the major medical groups say not only does it not work, but it can be harmful, such as causing depression and suicidal thoughts. The attorneys for the counselor who's challenging the ban, though, said that there's no evidence that the kind of talk therapy that she wants to do is harmful. And she says that the studies that Colorado is pointing to make their case are biased and flawed.
What happens when different states disagree about proper treatment, Maureen? Did arguments get into this at all?
So Justice Barrett, she asked about this. She pressed Colorado's attorney about how the court should apply the law if one state says it has a good reason to ban conversion therapy and another state says they have a good reason to encourage it. The Colorado's attorney said a state that might want to encourage conversion therapy, they can't point to any evidence to support that. On the other hand, she said the fact that Colorado is relying on the medical consensus view that conversion therapy is harmful, that proves, she said, that the state is not discriminating against another viewpoint because there is no other view in the medical community.
I know Justice Samuel Alito raised the issue of medical standards becoming politicized. What exactly were the issues he brought up on this point?
Well, when the Supreme Court in their last term debated whether Tennessee could ban puberty blockers and hormone therapy for transgender minors, there seemed to be a lot of concern among the justices about whether the medical arguments for such care had been influenced by the political debate about transgender and gay issues. So it's not surprising that a similar issue was raised here. And again, Colorado's attorney said there's no evidence that politics is behind the medical consensus that conversion therapy is bad. But the Justice Department attorney who argued against Colorado's law pointed out that medical consensus can change. He noted that as recently as the 1970s, the medical community thought being gay was a mental illness.
All right, well, where do we go next, Maureen? Do we get the sense that justices are leaning one way or the other?
Yeah, it seemed like the conservative justices, and they have a supermajority on the court, were sympathetic to the therapist's arguments. So the main question may be whether they completely agree with her that Colorado's law is unconstitutional, or whether they merely agree for now that it does infringe on her First Amendment rights. So the lower court didn't use a tough enough standard when they scrutinized the law, and they could send it back to the lower court to do that. And that would give Colorado another chance to argue that even if the law does infringe on free speech rights, they have a good enough reason to do so.
All right, Maureen Grappi covers the Supreme Court for USA Today. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you.
It's a jam-packed day for the Major League Baseball postseason. The Yankees kept their season alive last night with a 9-6 come-from-behind win over the Blue Jays, while the Mariners jumped out to a series lead over the Tigers. Today, all 4 remaining divisional series will be in action, beginning just after 3 p.m. Eastern Time. You can follow along with USA Today Sports. And thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can find the podcast wherever you get your audio, and you can email us at podcasts@usatoday.com. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.